Awesome.
How I
Thanks, Daniel.
like to, yeah, no, of course. How I like to start with everyone who comes onto the podcast is essentially with an introduction. What I want to do is give the audience context naturally first, because me and you, we've had more of a connection than most of the people that I've had on the podcast. We've had a couple discussions at this point. We actually met through a room that I host on Clubhouse called Around the Startup World, where ultimately we create a forum for open sharing for founders to come up on stage, talk about the cool projects that they're working on from anywhere in the world. And we've had some really interesting people come up and talk about their projects. It started out as just an idea that I had to, I honestly approached it with a different intention. I wanted myself to just share interesting startup news that I thought was cool that other people would find interesting as well. But ultimately, it turned into something that I think is far more valuable today, which is just an open hour where founders are the ones sharing that news about themselves. And I think it was either the first or the second episode that you came up on stage and you were sharing what you're working on with Cloud Champions. The feedback you provided was just absolutely awesome. And I asked if you wanted to come back for another one, and you did.
That's
Thank
right.
you. It's been awesome having you up on stage. The feedback that you give founders is so incredible. I think they walk away with just a wealth of knowledge. And so with that, now that the audience of how we kind of met and hit things off, also real quick plug for anyone who's interested in tuning into Around the Startup World. Join us every Tuesday and Thursday, Central Time, according to the US, at 8 a.m. And come talk to us about the interesting stuff that you're working on. But I want to pass the time over to you, Neil, real quick, just so that we can hear a little bit about your background, who you are, where you're from, both from a personal and also a career perspective, and then what you're doing right now with your current business.
Absolutely, Daniel. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm also a listener of the podcast here with Pitch It, and it's been a lot of fun co-hosting on Clubhouse with you. And yeah, it's so important in these times to find community and connect, especially globally and across boundaries. So I appreciate the chance to come on here and speak a bit about my business, Cloud Champions. But of course, first tell you a little bit about myself and my background. So yeah, was born and raised on the West Coast in Seattle and grew up, always wanted to move abroad, always wanted to, had an affinity for languages as a child. So kind of used that to try to punch my ticket, punch opportunities, especially when I graduated and faced a lot of headwinds, as many people did in the last kind of 10 years ago after the kind of Great Recession period. So what I did, a kid from Seattle, studied Chinese language. I saw that Chinese GDP numbers were bumping. It was, I think 9% was reported. And this is at a time when myself and many other grads were really smushed up against each other looking for the same opportunities. So I thought that I could bet on myself. I was young, 21, ambitious. So I bought a one-way ticket to Beijing, and I had already made some trips to pound the pavement there, already had some deep connections there from academics, and had tried to build myself a runway out there. And just landed at a really interesting time for the city, learned the fundamentals of business development, learned the fundamentals of finance and risk management, was working as a research analyst for a small boutique startup, and had that kind of first startup experience reporting directly to the founder. We were a team of about 5 to 10 financial and market analysts. And I was responsible for covering renewables sector for China and identifying opportunities, reporting those up, and then also managing our CRM of something like 1,500 hydropower projects, which we could then prepare and put in front of investors. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. I've always been deeply fascinated with China. I grew up from a pretty religious perspective, so I don't practice anymore necessarily, but I was raised LDS or Mormon, as most people are familiar with the term. And I have a brother actually who is younger than me by a couple years, but he served a mission in Taiwan, which I know it's not China, right? And there can be some heated discussions around that, particularly if you are in China. But one thing that has always just captured my curiosity, and I actually took an Asian humanities class in college where we deep dived into Chinese culture, is Chinese culture. That has always fascinated me. And so while you were there, how does and this is just a sidebar question, right? Like we have so much more to get into
Sure.
with Cloud Champions, but I'm so curious, what is the startup scene like there? We just see so many crazy cool and also innovative startups coming out of China these days. I think people are so hungry there. They have such a fire burning within them to make their mark on the world and create a product and, you know, become successful. What was it like in your experience?
Yeah. And I'll just caveat by saying it's changing very rapidly. So the up to date, and I can only give you my perspective on what it was like when I was there, but you have a really nice mix, mix if you're interested in business development startups in cities like Beijing, Shenzhen, Shanghai, because, for example, in Beijing, I mean, there is just access to capital. There is just access also to political decision makers. So part of my role was crunching through what was happening from the legislative side around renewables, public, private, what the priorities were in terms of everything from 5-year plan all the way down to local, regional perspective, and trying to help us identify what our niche could be to drive investment into and then due diligence and first touch risk management activity on. So we very quickly got onto job creation and smart cities, and we were looking for energy intensive industries that wanted to locate next to renewable power sources in order to create jobs and basically help relieve stress off of the rural urban divide, which is a longstanding topic in many countries, including China. So this actually led my interest in data centers and ICT infrastructure, future of computing, and cloud computing. And I began to cover what companies like Google were investing in the US on the Dal River in Oregon and in upstate New York. And I realized that many global companies, we didn't think of them as cloud providers back then. It was just, you know, Google and Amazon were building in ways that they could locate these energy intensive data centers next to renewable, low cost, reliable electricity. So that was, that is just foreshadowing for later because I did end up at Amazon and AWS in my career.
Wow.
Yeah.
That, I mean, it's such a crazy story. Whenever I hear different people's backgrounds, right? Like it's all such a diverse mix that points from, you know, connecting the dot to connecting the dot that shows who they are, what they've become. If anyone were to look at your LinkedIn profile, it's so crazy to see, you know, where you started in terms of exploring out and just taking a risk and a shot in China, and then going to Amazon and then doing everything that you're doing now with Cloud Champions, which I definitely want to hear more about because I think it's really interesting, everything that you're doing, helping professionals transition or accomplish career goals in the way that they need to land jobs at big tech, which I think you're perfectly suited for with all the experience that you've had. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about Cloud Champions specifically, how this was born in your brain, this idea to create, you know, a consulting business that can promote diversity and inclusion, as well as just helping anyone who has a desire to transfer to big tech kind of accomplish that goal. What set you down that path of doing Cloud Champions?
Yeah, absolutely. And you asked about the future of work topics at the beginning of this. And one of those that a friend of mine, Nahia Orduña, she's an author and speaker who I just had the chance to interview on my YouTube channel. She speaks about the idea of digital reinvention and like your personal reinvention. And I've been through those reinvention cycles. And so that's why ultimately I'm where I am now and what I'm working on. So at the end of a year in China, fast forward, I've worked as a research analyst for a startup. I also had a gig working for a San Francisco-based hedge fund. And that was like short-term, high-intensity portfolio work. I did about 8 weeks of work for them and got rave reviews. for my unconventional approach and my skill set on the ground, my ability to penetrate and get information first and primary source that wasn't available on blogs like Seeking Alpha. And this was all very exciting, but I realized that either I was going to stay and be in China for the next 10 years as a China analyst, or I needed to get some Western work experience in an actual office, because I'd been having a great time kind of globetrotting around through, I think it was 12 different provinces in China for my project. And this was fantastically interesting. But it was also kind of a lonely lifestyle because I was moving a lot. I was traveling all the time. So it made sense to me at this point. My parents were back home in Seattle, and my girlfriend was in Europe at the time. So first of all, I ended up moving to Europe for a year and job searching there and failed. I got verbal offers, but I was entry level. I didn't have the skills that they could justify hiring and providing a visa for me over someone else. And what that meant was that I couldn't be with my girlfriend in Europe. So this, I think, this was like a life lesson for me. It was like, you need to equip yourself with skills such that you can decide what you want to do, where you want to live, and who you want to spend your time with. And
I love that.
That was the way that I was seeing the world working for me. That's the way that the UK, was teaching me. So I had to reset. I was out of savings at this point. I had some savings from my job, so I'd had about a year to sort of go all in on the Europe idea or bust, and it ended up being bust.
Okay.
Yeah. So here I am.
About things, because we don't hear that enough, right? Most of the passed on it was you bust or make it, and I made it, but then we don't hear so much about it was bust.
Yeah, it was bust, and that hurts your confidence, and you try and realize that it's not only about you, but what are these external factors that are affecting you, but more, what are like the internal levers that you can control? And this is something that I came back to in the methodology that I built for Cloud Champions to help other people face down these similar challenges and do it quicker and easier with less setbacks. So I realized that I had skills for a role at Amazon. And I was very surprised about that. I didn't understand that there were any jobs other than software developer at tech companies. I was very naive. I didn't understand that sales, marketing, finance, HR, everything that goes into it, because I'd only worked in the startup and I'd only worked in one particular niche of finance over in China. Right. So I go to the interview. At this point, actually, I had been, job searching for some significant time back in the US. And that interview, it just clicked. So it was about 2 weeks from application to offer letter. And then suddenly I was starting at my day one. And I don't know why that worked out at that point, but that was really fortuitous for me because I'm a Seattle kid. I grew up watching giants like Microsoft, giants like Starbucks, sprout up from the 80s and 90s into what they are today. So I was thinking to myself, and I'm a kid who went off to private college at the exchange of taking on like 6 figures of college loan debt in my family's name. So I needed solutions. I needed to problem solve. And this was part of why I'd gone to China, was I thought that I need to either surf this wave of this economic challenge and do this the easy, quick way, or it's going to be a slow, painful death by 1,000 cuts. So my hope was that this hometown bookseller named Amazon one day might have the same growth trajectory like a Microsoft, because I'd seen the Microsoft families in the east side of Seattle. And I was like, this is not just income, this is wealth. This is wealth creation. This is a generational wealth creation. And I thought that that was the best way to try to give security to my parents and security to me and my fiance. So I had a lot riding on that interview.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I think, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned just career path that I've had, whether that's working at Lime or Uber, is, and I think it applies here to Amazon and ultimately any company, startup or otherwise, that you can get in and have some equity stake in, is equity just changes the game in terms of salary, wealth creation for individuals, which is why I think so many people have this strong desire to get into tech companies, any of the FANG companies, right? Your Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. They compensate their employees so well, not just in terms of salary, but as part of that compensation, equity, a nice work environment. Like there's so many desirable things, which makes it hard for some startups coming into the game to compete with, right? Because these big companies can offer so much, which is ultimately
for that talent. Yeah.
to retain top talent. But going back to the equity thing, like so many people don't understand that, you know, if you get in with a startup that you believe and ultimately does have potential to become a unicorn, right? Like 60K salary, which seems on the low end, right? But let's say you get 60K salary and 50K equity every year, right? Like if that company 10X's, 100X's, you're a millionaire like many times over. And so I want to hit home real quick with that, which it sounds like you absolutely saw the value of and what you were doing with Amazon that has ultimately led you to this realm where you can coach others down that same path for that reason or for other reasons. Is equity really is a big game changer for anyone across the board considering doing anything with startups. Like it can be such a life-changing form of compensation.
Yeah, and we have founders in our channel and in our show around the startup world who speak to this and convey their vulnerability about this. About, hey, do I partner with someone when I found? Do I have a co-founder or not? Do I need one? Should I get one or not? And then also, do I go the VC route? Do I go Kickstarter? Like, how do I manage my equity table right so that I can make long-term decisions, even though we all face this kind of short-term pressure? So yeah, I'm very happy that I passed that interview, because once you're in the big tech ecosystem, it's a lot easier to move around inside of the beast than when you're external, because you've already translated your value prop into their internal kind of lingo and culture, right? You get a few years of results under your belt, you find some promotions, then you have the option to change departments, change business units, and hopefully you're learning really great skills that whole time. So I kind of treated Amazon as like an incubator for me. I wanted to discover what I later knew was called business development and strategic account management. Those were the skill areas that I wanted to drive towards, but I didn't even know what those words meant when I first joined. So I had a lot of great learning experiences. And when I coach other, for example, informally for free, I coach graduates from university, and I always encourage them, just get yourself into an office job. It sounds really funny because we lionize the folks who do the other thing, but if you can do some time in the office and you report to a boss and you manage stakeholders and you lead meetings and you communicate with people, that is so foundational. And then you can jump and start your own thing, and you're able to think intentionally about what kind of culture I want to create. So
absolutely.
That's about that.
Yeah, I remember. So there's this podcast that I discovered it a couple of years ago, probably 2017, and it's been around for even longer. It's called This Week in Startups, and it's like one that I revere pretty well, just because there's so much valuable advice that's shared on it. And I remember one of the early things that cut pretty deep to me listening to that. 2017, it was right before I joined Lime at the time to help them launch their initial electric scooter fleet in San Diego. The gentleman who does the podcast, Jason Calacanis, very successful angel investor, he had said, so many people out there want to go out and start companies and you have no skills. And he was like, the first thing you need to do is you need to get some skills under your belt. And I remember hearing that and having this moment of introspection where I was like, oh shoot, like what skill do I have? Like what do I bring to the table? What's my superpower? And I think that's the question, the $1 million question that we all try to answer. And once we can answer that, I think that's when we start seeing doors and paths open in front of us, because you have this clear vision of who you are as a person, what you can contribute, and what kind of impact you want to have. You have your point A, which is what's your superpower, and your point B is the impact and the end goal you want to reach. And then the application is the path between your point A and point B, which can be very versatile, right? Like anyone who has, like, you can have that be a curvy line that takes you from point A to point B. Like it's all about applying the superpower to reach the end goal in whatever format you think is appropriate.
I like that a lot. And it requires a lot of patience and self-love and forgiveness for things that you might mix up or mess up along the way. And it's tough sometimes in these high stakes, like corporate environments. So yeah, as I was having these experiences and growing internally, I started to gravitate not only towards these, senior business development roles, team lead, sales management type roles, but I also started volunteering with our employee engagement group. And I stood up and was responsible for career development work stream and all the initiatives for a department of 200 people in our London office. And this was senior managers, directors, as well as fresh grads. And I got to create the programming, lead tool rollouts, and partner with our internal HR, all while reviewing metrics on employee engagement. And Amazon has some really great systems and tools for this. So that kind of opened me up of like, hey, I have an opportunity to scale this passion, these learnings beyond myself, and also partner with other people who know more than I do so that we can actually touch more people's careers and help people make choices and decisions that they're happier about, that set them on a better long-term trajectory. And that is how I got very focused on careers after that project in London.
Okay, got it. And I think that's a really good segue into what I would love to hear about next, which is what is Cloud Champions and how you started it, what the big mission is there. Because, since we've had a couple conversations, I know a little bit about what that mission is. And one of the things that really drew me to you as a person is, I think, a shared mission that we have, which I believe is manifest in what you're doing with everything with Cloud Champions, which for me revolves around how can I as a person have the greatest impact possible, not only in my life, but as many lives as possible. How do I keep my inner fire lit and going? And how do I spread that fire to light like candles or fire within other people so they can then run with that fire and have this snowballing effect where they're then going off to light as many inner fires as possible. So I'd love to hear about, just generally what you're trying to accomplish with Cloud Champions and what set you down that path that you're on now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So I had been considering my end game for a while in big tech. And so I was in for 9 years and I was like evaluating my options. I'd moved to 3 different cities from Seattle to London to Berlin. And at this point I had pivoted into AWS cloud as an account manager. And I was working with customers that are really exciting in Series A+ startups. I was negotiating long-term multi-million-dollar contracts between them and AWS. Wow. And also getting a chance to lead innovative projects in the data space, machine learning with customers that were doing really exciting stuff that I cared about. So I began to think about that this was great and I enjoyed using these skills, but maybe could I apply them differently to have a greater impact? And this led me to think about, okay, do I want to switch up something about, I've been working full-time since I came out of college. Do I want to make a change in my setup? And this led me to actually decide to start my own business, to start a social enterprise called Cloud Champions. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we do and why. And then I think the mission will speak through in that as well, because I have my personal advocacy and volunteering that I do, which is separate, but Cloud Champions, let me tell you a bit about what we do. So I created a social enterprise that provides business and technical consulting to 2 groups. So mid-career professionals in one group and startup founders in the other. So clients are turning to this type of coaching, this type of consulting, because the future of work does look a lot different. We have been seeing these disruptions like the rise of artificial intelligence. We've been learning and accelerating existing trends since the pandemic started, and we reflect on it now. We look back and we think about digital transformation and how much that's accelerated for things like e-commerce, remote work, our conceptions of work, our conceptions of the way cities are built and will function in the future. And I know you're active on autonomous vehicles there. So all of these things create a lot of new risks and opportunities for individuals and for founders. And I think that they demand an informed approach. So I spoke with experts like Nahia Ordunya, a colleague of mine, about this concept of what is happening to work. I asked her in our video. So she cited the World Economic Forum data around skills, and that we're in a skills-based economy. But actually 43% of employers expect to reduce their workforce, and 50% of employees will need reskilling by 2025. This is almost kind of cute in retrospect, because this estimate was done before the pandemic struck globally. So what I quickly saw and understood from my own experience, that the skills needed to keep doing your same job, even if you're already there and making it, doing your same job, whether it's sales, marketing, finance, HR, and certainly engineering and solutions architecture and technical roles and software development, these skills are changing very rapidly. So basically, what do we do? How do we serve people? So for mid-career professionals, I lean on my decade of experience in navigating big tech. And so far in my first 3 months of operation, I've supported these mid-career professionals to upskill into roles that command more pay, benefits, and growth at companies like Amazon, AWS, Salesforce, Snowflake, Disney Plus, and Lenovo. So I'm very excited about the initial results, and I'm focused now on getting the insights out of this and creating an ecosystem and doubling down. So these are folks who are not coming from a tech background, who are not already in big tech companies. They are actually coming from places like finance, management consulting, MBA programs, government roles, nonprofits, and small business. And they're now in these big tech companies in roles where they're responsible and learning and enjoying and growing in spaces like cloud, data platform and software as service, streaming, AR, VR, and more. So we keep building and we keep kind of growing this ecosystem. So that's the mid-career professionals piece, and I can speak a bit about the founders piece as well. But do you have any questions on that?
Yeah. So maybe I'll form a question in my head kind of as I'm speaking through a comment that came to mind as going into detail on some of that. But one of the things that just became, so crystal clear in my mind as you were talking, something that I've had maybe a short opinion on as time has gone by as well, is just how much the future of education is changing in the face of the future of work. And you hit on that. I think you hit the nail on the head with how you described that, right? I forget what the stat was. I have it right here in the notes that you sent me, but so World Economic Forum said 50% of employees would need upskilling or reskilling by 2025, right? I think for so long, the world embraced this ideology, or even just this, concept that you go to school once, and that doesn't mean that you're not learning things on the job and hopefully bettering yourself as a person, but that ultimately that's the schooling that you need. Like that's the education, right? Whether that's a 4-year or anything else. And I think we're seeing just how much the world has changed, and how humans at this point are having to change our mindset in order to keep up with how much the world has changed. Because like tech is, and specifically anything that involves like software engineering is a perfect example of that. What coding boot camps have done in changing the landscape, right? Like you can attend a 6-month course and come out of it and land an entry-level job as a software engineer, making probably pretty close to 6 figures just from that 6 months. And in some cases, people even do make 6 figures. And so it's just so crazy. And like their path isn't all just clear and set from there. Like for software engineers particularly, and this has been embraced by that industry more so than others, I believe for a while, is you constantly have to stay up with trends, right? What are the new JavaScript libraries that are being introduced? Like, what are the new languages?
Open source versus what are the best in breed products? Yeah, absolutely. It's a very complex landscape to operate in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that we're seeing this transition happen in so many different industries, not just ones that are traditionally seen as tech-oriented or focused. And maybe the reason for that is because every industry is becoming tech oriented and focused. That there's no escaping, right? Like it's playing an increasingly important role in every single industry that there is. And so I guess the question that I would ask from there, in the work that you've done with Cloud Champions, you know, I think so much of what you do in order to have people come to you and walk away with success is probably mindset shifts, right? You have to get them to think differently, to see the world differently. Anyone who's been in a big tech company, sometimes, and you said it yourself as well, which I think is so perfectly stated, when you are in the big tech world, you can float pretty easily to other big tech companies, or if you so desire, because so much of the culture and the landscape is the same. The jargon can end up being the same. The work ethic is the same. Expectations are the same. And so what are some of like the big mindset shifts that you have to help people to make in order to transition and be more, I don't know, I guess just applicable or viable to be working in this future of work that we're creating?
Sure. That's a really interesting question. So I think from my perspective, what I've seen so far is I often work with people who are super high functioning, high performance individuals, right? They've been successful in nonprofits. They've been successful in their MBA program. They've been successful at a big financial firm or even like a fintech. And what I spend time with them on when I get on the call and listen to them, I am very direct, honest, and transparent about identifying signals that they're making that maybe were adaptive in their previous context, that were good, that were applauded in their previous context. Little things about the way they speak or what they lead with, how they present themselves, a little bit about their tone, about certain topics. And I try to help them unpack that and say, I see where you're going with that. I'd like to encourage you when you go to the interview, or I'd like to encourage you at your next manager one-to-one in the new company you're in. Think about, if you'd like to know that, think about a question like this, or have you ever tried asking it like that? Because you want to give people new tools for their toolkit. So I think of myself mainly as a business and technical coach who also does, executive development around leading effective meetings and things like that. I can serve a little bit of that mindset function. There are really great mindset coaches out there. If you're listening and you like to talk to one, Victoria Rusina comes to mind. She leads amazing transformative workshops on that. I like to take a very point A to point B. My goal is to get the role. My goal is to get a fast start. My goal is to make this pivot successful. Or even just my goal is, hey, I feel I should be earning more and I should be able to work from home. It's important to my family. And I'm tired of paying rent in New York City downtown. And I think I'm ready to move, maybe to Europe. Or I think I'm based in Brazil and I'm ready to move. Or I'm based in Russia and I'm ready to move because it's global and China as well. So I think all I really try to do is help shine the mirror to people and then gently help put more tools in their toolkit so that they come across the right way at the right time to the right people, because there are so many high functioning people that I admire that may face setbacks because of their communication or because of their anticipation. So those communication and anticipation, like reading and reacting to signals, is how I coach people to deal with this kind of in-group versus out-group mentality and signaling in tech.
Right. I love what you said around helping people achieve their expectations in whatever form they have those. I think one thing that I always made the mistake of was kind of feeling like I had to merge my idea of success with what other people thought success was, right? Like success to some people means you have $1 million and you can drive a nice sports car and come into work whenever you want, be your own boss, like different things like that. And on LinkedIn, there was this article title going around of millennials are YOLOing like their careers in the workforce post-pandemic, because now everyone has a clearer idea of what's important to them in their lives.
Right.
Like for me in particular, and I'm sure it was this way for so many people, when I finally had a conversation where I was brutally honest with myself around what I wanted, what success looks like to me specifically, not to some, influencer Instagram account that shows what it's like living a high life and driving a sports car for every day of the week, right? When I had that honest conversation with myself, you get to, I think, what's truly going to make you happy a lot faster. So you start uncovering, hey, it's okay if I don't make six figures if I can work remote and live in Thailand, right? Like, or something like that, or live in the countryside in in the US or wherever it is. Like people have different goals, different ambitions for what sounds appealing to them. But I think it's so important to figure out what goal we want to have is, and not be ashamed if it doesn't match someone else's goal of success, but just embrace it and try to lean in and figure out, like you said, how to get from that point A to point B. And, one of the things that I want to get into next is the tools that you mentioned, like that actually accomplishing that task of helping people go from that point A to point B, which is what you specialize in. And, in some of the materials that you sent me beforehand, you mentioned this 5-pillar system that you create, that ultimately, if people leverage these 5 pillars, their probability of success is X times more likely if they can leverage them appropriately and stick with them. So I'd like to pass the stage over to you to talk through what are those 5 pillars that you generally try to help people embrace as they're considering, mid-career shifts or trying to get into big tech companies.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for asking about that. This is a methodology that I developed the hard way myself over about 2 years of trying, iterating, trying again for my own digital reinvention. And I always encourage people, if you are looking for more like inspiration and discovery, my good colleague Nahia Ordunya, her book, she has a free PDF on her website, and I'd love to link this afterwards, and you can see my interview with her. She's fantastic. So if you do not yet know, like, should I make a change? What kind of change would I make? She really has you covered there. Where I come in is like, you're like, all right, I've got my sights set on this objective. I know that I want to be in this industry, and I'd like it to be in Europe, US, Thailand, wherever, or I need to be based in this location.
Yeah.
This methodology allows you to go in and create and give reasons to believe to the hiring manager, so that if you follow these and maximize these levers, which are right there for you, they're right there for me, and I just didn't see them until I realized they were there, you will be capable, credible, and visible to the hiring manager and the team and the company and the industry that you're trying to get into. So let me break this down. So it starts by, once you have that target in mind, the first thing I did was I identified what is the one key certification that I could achieve in my timeline that would be a real difference maker, that would be a real needle mover to show everyone that I'm going to interview with, even if I've only just passed the practice exam, even if I'm only 60% of the way through the e-learning modules, or maybe I've all the way passed and got a passing grade on the final certification exam. Let that speak for you. So figure out what that certification is and get ready to work your evenings and weekends on that. Create space, clear the books, get ready. So the second thing, you're going to be gaining skills from that certification. So what I did was I found a project, or I created a project in my current role where I could use my new skills.
I like that.
So this was a huge breakthrough for me, because I was like, man, I'm either doing my old job or I'm doing this new job. And in real life, it doesn't really work like that. Remember that you've got to give the hiring manager reasons to believe that you could be in this new industry of cloud, even though you've never been in it before, or that you could be in software, that you could be a product manager, even though you've only done a bit of program before. So you find a project, find a need on your floor, create a project, inspire people around you, build it so that you have an opportunity in your 9-to-5 job to be working with those skills that you want to be using long-term. This is so powerful. This is probably the most important pillar of these 5. So Of course, it's kind of hard to come up with a project from scratch, and you might be wondering what it is that you could necessarily do, and or it seems so disconnected from what you're doing currently. But let me
Yeah.
explain how to find that inspiration. So you need to figure out what is the top event for people in this industry around this company and this company's ecosystem, and then go to that event. Take a day off work if you need to. Make a plan, get there, commute, dial in, take notes, network. So in my resources, which you can find on my website, cloudchampions.net, or if you book a call with me, I'll give you a free PDF about this. But I will help you understand not just what to do, because it's easy for me to sit here on your wonderful podcast and say, hey, people, go to events. Hey, people, find a mentor. We all know what we're supposed to do, but I can help you understand how to do it for maximum impact immediately for what your objective is. So the fourth one is simply mentors, having multiple mentors. Everyone thinks they know what a mentor is.
Right.
Blow that conception up. You need people it's like you're climbing this wall. You need people who can help you climb that wall. You need technical mentors. You need business skills mentors. You need, also mentors that check in with you and be like, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Because you're going to be putting yourself in this intense environment when you're doing digital reinvention. My family were looking at me and they're like, you are taking all these steps like out of your comfort zone. Like, are you really sure you want to do that? Is it really worth it? Or it looks really tough, So you've got to just be ready to swim in that water and just go for it. So this is what I found. And then finally, the fifth one is trainings, because you will find that a lot of people focus on certifications and boot camp and hard skills, which is one piece of the coin. But my philosophy about communication and signaling and in-group, it's very important to upgrade your soft skills, about active listening, upgrade your soft skills about written communication, upgrade your soft skills about managing stakeholders and having a difficult conversation. Because even if you get into this role, if you burn out in 6 months or don't pass the probation, you haven't succeeded in your goal. And so he's got to be there for that long-term success. And I was surprised. I had been in my job title for a long time, but I actually, after I went and interviewed at AWS, I realized I definitely needed to level up my core skills. So I got very active about going to training, seeking out other departments who maybe had better trainings than my own for my skill set. And I just leveled those up. And I used a mentor who is actually the hiring manager in the target team to give me feedback and help me understand, oh, you need this type of client-facing ability. You need this type of internal complex stakeholder management. And then I was able to create a plan and work backwards from that plan in Amazonian terms to finally end up where I wanted to be in AWS. And it really felt good when I got there.
Wow. One of the things I wanted to emphasize that you hit on, which is a small point, or it seems small blowing it up, but in the example that you just gave of how you sought out trainings to make yourself better in the soft skill arena or any other arena, a soft skill I think is important to highlight, because a lot of the times I think we believe that it's harder to teach soft skills. And I think to some degree it is. Like, some people are naturally born with a better, ability to negotiate or to be empathetic and active listeners, like you said, right? But at the same time, through exposure and experience to these trainings, or even just scenarios where not having soft skills is a killer, so you have to learn to adapt and and develop some soft skills of your own. One of the things that you said that I wanted to highlight is you sought out trainings in another department from other mentors, if I understood that correctly, which to me, one, indicates who you are as an individual, which is you're a go-getter, and you see a solution to a problem that you have, and you go after it, even if it's unorthodox or untraditional. And I wanted to highlight that in particular, right? Because so many times, even if we are living out of our comfort zone or trying to, we still box ourselves in one way or another. And I think it's so important to have the mindset, the mentality that ultimately in a lot of ways, you can write the rules of your own interaction in the workplace, right? So if you're not getting something that you feel like you need, or if you need an answer to a question, if you need to learn something, a lot of the times it's a simple matter of trying to go after that thing, right? So if you're an operations manager, which I was in my instance at Uber, and you want to learn more about product management, or the bridge between the two, operations product management, or whatever the case is, you can have that gumption to go ask to shadow a product manager. I think so many times, so many people, they just, we build these boxes for ourselves where it's like, oh no, I can't do this, I'm an operations manager. But I think if we try to think outside of the box and come up with ways to increase our own skill set, and not be limited by what we believe is in our jurisdiction versus not, then I think the world just opens up to you, which to me, that kind of embodies a lot of what you presented with trainings. And I don't know, do you have any comments, anything you want to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also struggled to break out of my own boxes. And when I was in this process, so I created a project on the floor. I picked up a project where I could basically provide support, basically like be a DevOps engineer or like a poor man's solution architect for a machine learning project that was happening on our floor.
Oh, and I love that.
This was very cool because the team had a data scientist, they had a principal business leader, they had an advocate who wanted to basically publish the results of this predictive model to a bunch of Tableau dashboards and get everyone on the sales floor engaged on using this. But they needed quality data to feed into that machine learning model and to train it with in order to get, interesting results in inference. So what I did was I realized this was a great opportunity for me to use my knowledge that I was gaining from my certification and from my mentors and plug it into this project and work directly at a very close level with our senior machine learning engineer and translate these business requirements from the principal lead down into what type of infrastructure I needed to go and set up. It led to me going to office hours that I didn't know existed, that I looked up and found that I could go to office hours with technical people like actual AWS solutions architects and do whiteboarding sessions with them. And ultimately, I learned a lot about, I began to learn about big data and machine learning in a really meaningful way. So when if I had not had, as you put it, I love it, like the gumption to stand up and put my hand up and say, hey, I want to join your next stand up. I want to do a one-to-one with you, Ms. Principal, and understand what the business requirements are. Of course, I wasn't fully confident that I could definitely deliver on this, but we were scrappy. Everyone was out of their comfort zone on this project. And this became one of the best points that I made in the opening 5 to 10 minutes of each of my interviews that I went to next was, hey, here's what I've done. Here's the track record. Here are the reasons to believe. So just making it easy for that next role to hire you is kind of what the 5 pillars is about.
So one more quick comment on that, just because I love this topic so much and I'm so passionate about the impact that it can have. So you mentioned one way that you in particular had perhaps unknowingly at this time applied your second pillar, right? Because you said it was through some introspection that you even landed on what these 5 pillars were, even though you had gone through all of the 5 pillars in your own career already, which is that project implementation portion of it. So if you had stayed within this box of looking at what your existing role was and not thinking of ways that you could apply projects in your own workplace, you would have never had that opportunity come up, which to me is incredible, right? Because not only does it speak to the value of projects as the second pillar in branching out within your workplace to create learning opportunities for yourself, but from an external perspective, looking in at that employee who's trying to do those projects, right? They are seen as so much more valuable by that workplace because they're someone who is trying to augment more than just their immediate sphere of business. They're trying to have a greater impact, and even though it's just for their own learning, it's still for the benefit of the business, for the company, and they are seen as that much more valuable. And so I think that there's so much opportunity that comes for an individual from trying to expand beyond your current role or your current set of responsibilities. One of the biggest things they said at Uber that I love, because I believe it 100%, and I think it should apply to any aspect of life, is if you want a promotion, you basically already need to be doing what you're trying to get promoted to is doing. And I think a good way of looking at it, because one, it makes the promotion easy, because there's no doubt for the person who would be doing the promoting that you're capable of it because you're already doing it. But two, I think it puts the burden of proof or responsibility, or the level of hunger assessment, I guess, on the person who wants the promotion, because ultimately you write your own ticket, you write your own path at that point. And so you're only limited by the amount of impact that you want to have and believe you can have.
Yeah. And I'd like to take us, speaking of opportunity and impact, to the kind of the social mission piece as well.
Yes.
I think that's a really good opportunity. So I was extremely fortunate to get into this chain reaction of opportunities that happened once I was inside big tech. And I realized that, especially having this feedback, seeing the results from the application of these 5 pillars with the people that I'm coaching and consulting, I decided to, with this social enterprise, from day one, commit 50% of my revenue directly to nonprofits focusing on diversity and gender in tech. And the reason I chose to do this, and it's more about like a personal volunteering aspect as well, is that I had been in departments where there were lots of opportunities for people of diverse backgrounds, people who didn't look like me. And we were generally trending, or things were getting better. There was representation at senior leadership level. There was representation among the promo slate. There was representation among the incoming and at all levels of the organization. And then I'd also been in different departments and different sites where that was really not so much the case. And for many, many years, that hadn't really changed. And I found myself reporting into 5 layers of people who looked exactly like me around the world. And I also had so I also had friends who left, and people can get in. It's not only about hiring, it's about retention and development, because I've had friends who got in and they were not getting the kind of development and engagement that they should, and 2-3 later they're out. So I wanted to build an idea to kind of look at this from the perspective of, cool, what if I build a flywheel such that as my business scales, my social impact through nonprofits can also scale, and I can also learn about nonprofits at the same time. So what I want to emphasize is, to all founders who are listening and are considering, this is a very popular topic these days, like figure out a flywheel that scales. This is a classic Jeff Bezos idea. It's like, if you want to create an ecosystem, if you want to create a community around you, try to create something that scales with you and make a bold bet on it. So that's the way that I've rounded it out with Cloud Champions. And then I can tell you maybe on the overtime or another time about the volunteering that I do with a nonprofit called Women in Big Data.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you have a couple minutes left still, but I would absolutely love to hear about your involvement in that, because I think that the efforts that we make today to shape the workforce are going to create that better future of work that we're all trying to hope for, that we hope for today, and that we're trying to lay the groundwork for. And not to say that groundwork hasn't been, trying to be laid for some time, but I love when I can go on a site like LinkedIn or, most of my Instagram or Twitter stuff, it's very much like entrepreneurial or founder focused, because that's like the ecosystem I'm trying to create for myself and put myself in. So that's basically all the content that I see as an echo chamber of sorts. But I love how top of mind this topic is for everyone in terms of creating equal opportunity, creating more inclusive workforces that make people feel like they want to be there and continue to grow there and participate, rather than, like you said, coming in, seeing how things are, seeing that they're not changing and not getting development or betterment opportunities, or just wanting to be applied somewhere else. And so I would love to hear about what long story short, I know that was a long-winded comment for that, but I'd love to hear about what you're doing in the last couple minutes with that nonprofit.
Yeah. So I wanted to, coming out of 9 years in big tech, I had a list of things that I wanted to try my hand at and accomplish. So from Jan 1 this year, I was full-time on Cloud Champions. And I also started volunteering with 2 nonprofit communities. The one that I've stuck around with and found a fit with in terms of involvement, community impact is called Women in Big Data. And I was specifically interested, first of all, to learn more on a technical level and keep my skills up to date on topics like data, analytics, big data, machine learning, and AI. So first and foremost, it was a fantastic opportunity for me to have access to really smart people and events, people that I can interview, like Nahia Ordunya, who I've interviewed on my YouTube channel. But second, I had a hypothesis, and I don't know if you've ever wondered if you could take your skills and apply them in a different context and really deliver results with them. So I was wondering if I could apply my sales and business development in a nonprofit context around corporate fundraising. So my hypothesis was maybe the kind of relationship management skills from one context could also, with some additional knowledge and upskilling, which I've undertaken with mentors, which I've undertaken with events, and I need to take another look at certifications. But so far, I've had a chance to work within a corporate fundraising work stream at Women in Big Data. And I've secured funding from clients, including Netflix, Disney, and a few more that are still cooking. So basically, I just want to encourage listeners out there as well. If you ever imagined that you could take your skill set to another industry, you could take your passion and give some of that time, whether it's teaching to code, whether it's volunteering on education empowerment, whether it's volunteering on corporate fundraising like I'm doing. There's nothing wrong with giving it a shot. It's better to be in than on the sidelines right now. So just give it a try. It's okay if you have setbacks. As an ally, I often have setbacks or awkward moments, or I have learnings and things like that. I accept that. That is more than worth it to me for what I get in return. So yeah, I don't know what you think about that, Daniel. Yeah.
Well, I think that prompts one final segue in my mind, which is one of the easiest ways to give back that you can literally start today if you have a mobile phone is through content creation, like what we're trying to do right now, right? So I think that naturally people who go into content creation with the idea of making it a full-time job, they want to find out ways to monetize it. But I think that there are so many ways that you could use content creation just as a form of giving back. Through teaching a mini lesson, a free course on Coursera that you throw out there to people. Yeah. And so I really believe that the next few decades, perhaps this is just the future, is going to be the proliferation of everyday content creators, which we've seen to some extent, right? So it's like, oh, duh, like you're saying that, and it's already like a fulfilled prophecy. But I believe even more so, right? Like people who don't consider themselves content creators or influencers, I believe are awakening to this idea that you don't have to be a content creator. Like you don't have to consider yourself a content creator to put something out there of value to the world and of value to yourself. One of my biggest philosophies is that this life is all about creation, what we can do to create, to put something out there into the world. And it's a give and take, right? I think that we have to consume in order to be able to create, which I think plays into your pillars. We have to upskill ourselves. We have to train ourselves through events, through mentors, through whatever. So just like everything else in life, there's a balance. But I think ultimately our major mission is to leave some semblance of ourselves. Like, what did we add to the world to make impact while we're here? And so I think it ultimately comes down to creation. And I want to tie that into the final couple minutes here, where I want you to give out any plugs that you'd like for any content that you've created, anything that you're working on, and then we'll close things out from there.
Thanks so much, Daniel. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, I think that if people enjoyed the podcast today, definitely come and tune in, join us in the Clubhouse room around the startup world. as Daniel mentioned, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 a.m. Central Time US, right?
Yeah.
And that's 7 a.m. Pacific. And yeah, we just have a lot of fun there. We have really interesting and inspiring guests. I always leave really fired up from those hours because people ask us about really interesting ideas and share. And occasionally guests will also advise other guests. So yeah, please check that out. You can find me at cloudchampions.net or Neil Metzler on LinkedIn. So that's NeilMetzler on LinkedIn. Neil like Neil Young, Metzler, it's a German last name. So hope you like it. Yeah, but I'm looking and open for content creation and co-collaboration. So I have some interviews coming up next, and yeah, just working on getting my methodology into maybe like an e-learning platform to scale it a bit, make it more self-service, and then hopefully doing some global workshops and trying to engage communities in, for example, like Russia, Brazil, China, about the kind of global mobility topic within tech, something I'm really excited about. And yeah, that's it for me. So cloudchampions.net is the place. Check me out there on LinkedIn and on YouTube.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And I always look forward to our Around the Startup World discussions. I'm always surprised by the direction that it takes, because you never know. People come up and they share the most interesting ideas. One of the ones that caught me off guard that I'm so glad that I had a brief insight into was, I don't know if you were there, I believe it was one of the first ones, but it was a woman who was talking about like a cocktail education that she up, right? Which I found so fascinating. She was essentially targeting cocktail enthusiasts or people who want to be, better at making cocktails in their house. Like what kind of products could be sold to them. And I think she was considering, not only alcohol sales of different kinds, like making recommendations based on the cocktail, but also just content in general that she could eventually sell to this user base. And so I'm always surprised by the conversations that we have with really interesting founders working on really cool projects from around the world. So definitely check that out. And yeah, if anyone out there, Neil, I hope it's okay if I say this on your behalf, but if anyone is listening to this and you're interested in talking to myself or Neil about what you're working on as a founder, either in podcast format or any other form, definitely check us out, reach out to us, and we would love to have that conversation with you. I think that, again, not to speak for you, Neil, so feel free to jump back if you want to retract anything.
Yeah, no.
But I think we are ultimately trying to have as big of an impact as we can on people's lives in any fashion that we can. And right now, that's taking the form of how can we help them be better in the business world? How can we help them achieve their career goals? So absolutely check us out and get in touch if you want to be present on an interview. And other than that, I think that's the only thing that I want to plug for right now. But yeah, Neil, thank you so much for your time today coming on. I'll turn the last couple minutes over to you, or seconds, I guess, if anything else that you want to say in closing. But I think that you've left so much wealth and wisdom, not only but for anyone who's going to be tuning in today. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you for having me, and thanks for having others that you've had on your show. And I just want to reiterate your message about content creation. Start somewhere. Figure out, you may be sitting there listening to this and you are actually sitting on your own methodology. You are sitting on your own lessons learned. And think about, it's a pity if others don't get to maybe experiment with that, iterate with that, benefit from that. So it's the same if you have a startup idea, right? If you're thinking about it, you don't have to have it fully formed yet. There's a series of iterations. We're all in that lean startup process. So
Right.
Don't be afraid to speak up and share, and also encourage others around you. It is scary to get that voice out there. And traditionally this scene and like VC is a little bit of monoculture. So please disrupt that, challenge that. Do not be afraid to make your voice heard loud and clear. And that's something that we want to continue to emphasize on our Clubhouse channel as well. So that's it from my side. Again, this is Neil Metzler, and Daniel, thank you so much for having me. And looking forward to our next conversations.
Me too. Thank you so much, Neil. And with that, we'll round it out. So everybody, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in.